You know, I have to just tell you, my mother used to say when you're speaking in front of folks that you should stand straight, shoulders back, head up, tummy in. Here's to you, Mom. And so I've got to tell you that, again, good afternoon. I'd like to introduce Dr. Maria Garase. I'm Daryl Georger. We're faculty members at Mercyhurst University. Mercyhurst is a liberal arts college, a four-year liberal arts college in Erie, Pennsylvania. It is built on the Catholic charism. And we are here to present Voices and Mercy Behind the Walls, serving incarcerated and university students through inside-out prison exchange courses. And so I want to make mention the inside, I don't think this laser printer.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I want to make sure that you see inside out, and we abbreviate inside out with IO. And so when you see IO, I want you to see that. Now, our presentation overview is we're going to start with a framework of mercy as it pertains to Sister Catherine McCauley, the Inside Out Prison Exchange Program at Mercyhurst, student experiences, the expansion of our programming, and then my part, which is actually putting this program or this coursework in action after the course has been taught. Now, this is something I grew up with as far as this statement with Catherine McCauley. I think Christy will agree that at the university, we've been reminded of this many times. And being at the university 42 years, I've been reminded of it by not only the president or presidents, but also by many of the sisters. And Catherine McCauley stated, the spiritual, and this is what I want to highlight, the spiritual and corporal works of mercy, which draw religious from a life of contemplation, so far from separating them from the love of God, unite them more closely to Him and render them more valuable in His holy service. And so please remember, today we're going right to the heart as far as of what we feel is Catherine McCauley's belief, and that is in the spiritual and corporal works of mercy. As we go on just a little bit, I want to review those spiritual and corporal works of mercy, and you do see a couple in each case highlighted. Those are the spiritual and corporal works in which are embedded in the IO course that Maria has done so very well with. But the spiritual works is to instruct the ignorant, counsel the doubtful, admonish the sinner, bear wrongs patiently, forgive offenses willingly, comfort the afflicted, pray for the living and the dead, and grateful, and this is key, grateful contemplation of God's world. Now, the corporal works of mercy are to feed the hungry, to give drink to the thirsty, to clothe the naked, again, embedded into the IO course, welcome the stranger, visit the sick, obviously embedded is visit the imprisoned, bury the dead, and care for a common home. So at this particular point, I would like to hand off to my colleague, Dr. Maria Garase.
So hello. What I will talk about here is how the spiritual and corporal works of mercy really guide the goals for the Inside Out Prison Exchange program. So that we'll see these in the reflections that I have of students, as well as what we do with this program. So again, counsel the doubtful, welcome the stranger, bear wrongs patiently, visit the imprisoned. I also did not wake up one day and say, hey, I want to teach in a prison. So most people don't do that. In terms of this, in 2017, I started to facilitate a think tank on restorative justice at SCI Albion, which is a male medium security facility. At that prison, I had 8 men who were either serving life or long-term sentences, and I brought community members into the institution from the district attorney's office, the probation office, juvenile probation and adult probation, the public defender's office, and some faculty from other universities in the area. So since then is when I started my work as a volunteer in the institution, and then at some point I decided that I would really like to bring my students in on a regular basis to meet with individuals and to have a class where it's an equal playing field. And the class actually looks similar to this room, where I will talk about the opportunity here for the people inside. So my inside students are the incarcerated individuals. So if you hear me say inside, that means incarcerated students. Outside students, obviously outside the walls, would be the university students at Mercyhurst. So we create this space inside the institution in the education building, which I have a room that looks like this, and we would be sitting in a circle. You would be inside, outside, inside, outside. So we are sitting 2 feet away from each other so that everybody there is my student. I don't typically even use inside or outside while we are there. You are all of my students. This is an equal playing field. We sit in a circle. I am part of that circle as well. And we have dialogue and discussion about issues in the criminal justice system, mostly pertaining to issues of social justice. So with Temple University, I did not create this model of pedagogy. It is out of Temple from Lori Pompa. It's been in existence about 30 years. Started in Pennsylvania at SCI Graterford, which is now SCI Phoenix. So the goal here is to have a transformative learning experience that emphasizes collaboration and dialogue by inviting them to take leadership roles in addressing vital issues of social justice. So similar to what we've been talking about here, inviting people to the table. The incarcerated are stakeholders in changing the criminal justice system. I also at the beginning say the flip side. If you're not invited to the table, you're on the menu. So therefore, we need to have individuals who are part of the process. Next slide, please. So the goal of offering the course in this manner, which you just cannot get out of a textbook, is for our future criminal justice practitioners to gain insight into restorative justice concepts from individuals who are directly impacted by the criminal justice system. So these are my students in my most recent class. This is the 4th class that I've done. We were interrupted by COVID when the institution shut down. We thought that we'd be able to do Zoom, however, due to connectivity issues, and they couldn't be seated 6 feet apart, it was problematic. But I also just want to point out, this is a violation of the policy of the institution, because I took a picture on grounds, no photography allowed, but you'll see that I needed to get my photo. Next slide, please. Oh, and this is violation number 2, where we are actually closer in the parking lot, and you can kind of see the facility. You might be able to see the barbed wire in the back. Again, male, medium security prison. This is a photo inside of another class. I'd like to point out the dog. One of my inside students was also a trainer for service dogs. So it was great to see this little guy here as a puppy. When we started class, we had 5 months, got bigger. He sat, Omi, my student, sat next to me. He had the dog. The dog would scoot over to see me, and I could pet the dog while I was, teaching class. So that was another class. So how do we do this? Me and my students, we get into a van on campus at 12:15. We drive 45 minutes down. We have class for 3 hours. We drive 45 minutes back. So we do have time going down to kind of talk about what we're likely to be doing, and on the way back it's always like a debriefing session as well. So I bring together 10 university students, 10 incarcerated students each week. It is an entire semester-long class, so it is 16 weeks long. We meet every Friday. It is a credit-bearing course, so all students in the class receive 3 credits if they successfully pass the course. And we talk about issues in criminal justice. Again, the idea that they are all stakeholders in terms of their learning, as well as coming up with ideas and projects, which we'll talk about, for a change in criminal justice reform. Next slide. So you're probably wondering, how do you get these people into your class, right? This is usually one of the things that I'm asked by students from Mercyhurst, also students' parents from Mercyhurst, and individuals, because they would say, why would you want to go to a prison on a Friday afternoon and spend your whole day there? And I have to say it's one of the most rewarding things that I've done professionally. So I have a flyer that goes out to the institution. The class is promoted, I hate the word inmate, but it's the only way to say the inmate channel. I had it up for 4 days. It was up for 4 days. I had 108 men who applied for 10 spots in this class. Because there were 108 of them and they qualified due to being misconduct free for a minimum of 2 years, they had to have a high school diploma and or GED. Due to their policy, I had to interview every single one of them. And that was amazing. They also had to write an essay on their motivation for taking the class. I was looking for things like personal growth and not, hey, my parole is coming up, but rather, why do they want to be in this class? But also I used it as a writing sample. So can they write? What kind of sentence structure are they using? Capitalization, punctuation, all of those things. Many of the men are much older than my students and have been out of education for a very long time. They had to be committed to the class for the entire semester, so they couldn't be close to parole or a commutation or something that would take them out of the institution with transfer. I interviewed them all individually with my Department of Corrections representative, who became my partner in the course. Because everything is about safety and security and that being the priority, everything that I do has to go through them. So we interviewed the men together. The top 15 names came forward. They then had to go to psych services, social work departments to make sure that they weren't a predator, that they wouldn't be problematic in the course, but that they would be a good citizen in the class. They also had to go through a vetting process with unit managers, the deputy superintendents, the PREA officer. PREA stands for the Prison Rape Elimination Act. So again, we can't have individuals who are highly manipulative and or a predator, that it's possible that they could be on the radar, but not have a misconduct. So the vetting process is very, very important for who's selected. So then I selected 10 incarcerated students. I do not know the crime, the offense history, how long they are there, unless the individual discloses it to me. And that's part of, again, making sure that it's an equal playing field. We're not there to study them. I'm not there to put my criminology hat on or any of those things, but rather it is that we are learning about issues in criminal justice. Next slide, please.
Yep.
This is the men in my class. This is publicly available photos from the Department of Corrections, and these are the men in my class. And they should have a voice while we are in the class, and we've been talking about giving voice to the voiceless, the marginalized, the vulnerable, so it's important that we see them. The overall goal for the class is really to facilitate dialogue and education across profound social differences, which is really interesting because the Mercyhurst students, when they come in, they think that we're going to have these very different ideas about what the criminal justice system should look like, and are surprised at the similarities that we actually have. But they do have they are very different via social standing, class, race, ethnicity, and so forth. So through courses held inside prison involving students from higher education setting and incarcerated students. Next slide. So some of the goals, this is IO goals, not 10 goals, you're not 10 yet, but is really to gain new knowledge or content about the criminal justice system. Also, and things that we've been mentioning here throughout, is that we want to have individuals exposed to more opportunities for critical thinking, problem solving, communication skills, collaboration, and working with people who may be different from themselves in terms of diversity. We do large groups, we do small groups, we do individual reflection, group reflection, and discussions. It's important that they have the ability to go out of their comfort zones. It's so interesting to see some of them from day one, when the anxiety and nervousness is through the roof, to then be able to see at our closing ceremony where some of the individuals, grown men, who have tears in their eyes that we now have to vacate, we have to leave, and we can't have communication after this class. It's part of the inside out rule structure. But going out of their comfort zones, breaking down these barriers of we versus them. We see that especially in the national spotlight with police and minority communities that we've seen at the national level. We've seen George Floyd and some other examples here. Working through differences and ultimately looking at humanity behind the walls, that people have gifts and talents that really don't have that opportunity to have an outlet for. Next slide, please. Some of the topics include contemporary policing and crisis intervention units. So bringing in a social work aspect of what we've seen when certain calls come out and there's a police encounter. How have we done things differently from when some of the men have been incarcerated? So we look at contemporary policing. We talk about juvenile delinquency and juvenile justice. One of the individuals had disclosed that he's a juvenile lifer, that he went in at age 15. In Pennsylvania, life means life. There's no possibility of parole. And we talked about the separate systems of the juvenile justice system and the adult system. We talked about the war on drugs. Again, I didn't ask any of the individuals what their offenses were or anything, but when they started to feel comfortable and started to then say, here's my experience and here's how it fits. They then do a presentation in front of the class. There's prison administrators there, university administrators there. When I said before, getting out of their comfort zone, some of the individuals haven't had to speak in front of that large of a group before, or know that they're speaking to individuals who have the power to change their circumstances inside the institution. Next slide. So I want to preface this with the gaining new information and new insight. This is a reflection from one of the men in my class. There's a little bit of a glare here, so let me see if I can read this.
I can read it if you like.
Go ahead. Perfect.
I never really considered the role of punishment in society, even as a young man who typically engaged in criminal activities that I knew well could land me in prison. It amazes me the level of compartmentalization I, along with countless others, indulge as we take on these outlaw lifestyles. The fact that we come up with our own rules, codes, which some abide and others pretend to, never really registered at the same human/societal inclination for social contracts and setting things right when one is wrong. This course is super enlightening as it woke me up to the amount of SHI, whatever, I didn't know and I don't know.
My students keep it 100 all the time. But this was, I wish I had time to go through his entire essay, but some of their level of insight is just so profound about not only the reading, but how they fit into that reading, like learning about self, learning about others, learning about systems. That comes through their writing. And also, again, if I were to be able to give you the whole reflection, they don't have access to the internet. There is no AI issue. There is no chatting. It's all coming from them. And they do have typically have the time to do the reflection for this. Before we go to the next one, I just want to set this up for us. We had a very profound defining moment in the class this last semester. And it was, again, I don't ask them about their offenses or anything like that, but one of the men felt comfortable in the class to disclose when we were talking about restorative justice that he had a perfect example. And that was when the mother of his victim came to his mother to be able to say, I forgive him, and I don't want this to be a capital case. She also went to the district attorney's office to say, please do not seek the death penalty for me. And in that moment, one, in the state of Pennsylvania, the only way that you can receive a capital sentence is if you have a first-degree homicide. So he essentially disclosed to the class that he had committed a premeditated, consciously, purposefully, willfully, intentionally decided to kill another individual, and he took accountability for that. At the same time, just as I mentioned when we came in here, they're sitting like this. He's sitting next to two Mercyhurst students who did not recoil, who did not move back, who did not change. And in his reflection in the next class, he commented on that. He was like, I wasn't sure if I should disclose or not, but I felt comfortable, this is a safe space, and I think they need to hear that. I think all of the students in class needed to hear that, but I really think the Mercyhurst students needed to understand that when we talk about restorative justice, this is me. And we can go to the next slide. So once one of our classmates opened up about the crime he committed, and I was really shocked. This is from the student who sat directly next to him. I had grown to feel comfortable with this particular student. I was shocked to hear his testimony, but at the same time, my perception of him didn't shift. I didn't view him for the crime he committed, even after he confessed to doing so, but I still viewed him as my classmate and peer, and I respected him for opening up. Next slide. So these are some of the reflections. At the end of the class, I have them do a final reflection where they have to talk about what did they learn about self, what did they learn about others, what did they learn about community, what did they learn about systems. So it was really like a really open-ended kind of assignment, and I got such wonderful things, such different things that they picked out. This is another one from a student. The inside students often told us how this class was an escape or a vacation for them throughout the week because it was the only time that they felt comfortable to conversate, smile, laugh, and overall be relaxed. It's comforting to know that our presence made such a positive impact for them just because we were able to let their voices be heard. It has helped me become a better listener, and it has given me a better idea of the pathway I want to take for my career. I believe in redemption, and everyone is worthy of it if they are willing to put in the work. Next slide.
By the way, I want you to, again, at the bottom of each of these slides is actually the spiritual or corporal mercy in which the actions take place. Next slide.
Oh, go back, please.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes. It took a while, but after we started breaking into smaller groups, I found my voice. Each week, I was able to communicate my thoughts and ideas to my group without fear. It felt amazing. I remember this example so well because the looks the men gave me as I was speaking were filled with hope and a bit of pride. They were shaking their heads in agreement and almost seemed relieved that someone from the outside shared the same mindset as them. I will never forget that moment. And again, in the small groups, they're all small groups of 4, 2 inside students and 2 outside students. Next, please. This is one of my favorite ones. I was excited to call my family and let them know the good news. I got into the Inside Out class. The first meeting with Dr. G, which would be me, and they all thought I was intimidating. I think it's hysterically funny, but anyway. I could hold a conversation and talk, as you know, and this guy was a talker, wow. But to be amongst someone I look at such high standards made me question my ability to excel in this class, and boy did I get in way over my head. Then, the Mercyhurst students and the men of Albion taught me more in these 5 months than I feel I've learned in my 10 years of incarceration. Their truths made me feel better about myself. My pain from my absence from my family will be put to great use if I'm to remain the man I have become. I must continue the journey you have helped assist me on. Thank you, Dr. G. Next. I guess they're all like my favorite students. It's kind of crazy. Being covered in tattoos and being convicted of murder, I never expected anyone to see me as anything else but less than human. I'm grateful for this opportunity. It challenged me in ways I was not used to and allowed me to practice my communication with people that I've never met. I've also been given the chance to share what I've learned and done with my son, who is a state trooper. Each week, we talked about what I've learned, and he would share his experiences with me. It has created a conversation opportunity that was not there before. This individual, when he says covered in tattoos, like seriously covered in tattoos. A lot of the men were, I don't know how quickly you saw that photo, but some of them, if any of you have ever watched a TV show like Inked with Kat Von D, like has 4 portraits of his grandparents on his head, and pays homage to them all the time. Next slide. I think this is the last one. To be honest, I've always prided myself on being a people person, a conversationalist, and quick-witted. But looking back and reflecting on the first few classes, can see how being locked away for almost 10 years somewhat diminished that. I've been institutionalized. This class has reinforced my character development, my growth and change, and my talent, not just for writing, but also sharing my writings and being confident in my writings. For this individual here, there was a flyer that came out with the Pen American National Writing Contest, and they have an incarcerated writers component on that. I shared that with him, and we worked on that separate from my class, but as the class was going on, and he submitted that and was very excited that he had an outlet to be able to do that, and he really is a wonderful writer. Next. So that's just really like a snippet of some of the things that I've done. This is again my 4th class. The student projects that have come out of this have been around reentry. What are some of the things that individuals need to be equipped with so that they can be successful on the outside? One of those is looking at jobs, housing, educational opportunities. So we looking at what successful reentry back into society looks like. A number of the men had long-term sentences, and therefore technology had changed exponentially from when they went in, like with a beeper, you know, to cell phones and how everything is done on cell phones. So digital literacy, we talked about a lot. They also talked about some of their fears with being boxed out of certain types of jobs, and their employability would suffer because of that felony record. So therefore, they were interested in, how could I start my own business? And with that, many of them had some drug dealing in their past, and therefore understand business. Better than me.
Yes, I
Maybe
agree.
not better than you.
I agree. I read some of their work. I agree.
So they were interested in looking at, what if we had a class in entrepreneurship? What would that look like? How would we be able to apply or use the skills that we had on the outside before coming in to our advantage? And also, they were looking for opportunities to redeem themselves and be productive members of society.
Now, folks, it's my portion, and the last part is putting this in action. Now, I've had many colleagues ask me, Dee, you're a hospitality business professor. Why are you involved with this course? And I had to sit back and think about it. And in thinking about this, I remember my father, who we had 2 family members that were sisters, nuns. And I remember growing up constantly or consistently hearing about the corporal mercies. My most fond memory of my dad is walking to church, and he would talk about those mercies. And then, and this is a little difficult, but he took me to the Veterans Hospital to meet his colleagues, other special forces fellas that actually were quite wounded. And he also took me to, at the time, was the Goodwill to see some of his other colleagues that the only thing that they had was to work at the Goodwill, which is a great spot. And he said, you know, son, these fellas at 17 and 18 years old didn't choose to have a life like this. And with that being said, my father died when I was 14 then, which was a difficult situation. And I'm not saying that those wounded gentlemen were the lucky ones, but he passed away, he died when I was 14. And so my mother and the religious folks in the family used to emphasize these mercies, in which is a big part of this class. And when I heard of this class and the mercies, it automatically clicked, to give you an idea. And they pushed me in the spirit of these mercies, which is the reason why I feel that I made it to Mercyhurst and made it all of these 42 years at Mercyhurst. And over those 42 years, it felt like home, because the sisters and some of the old presidents would always ask, what mercies do you have in your projects and in your coursework, before we even discussed it at a roundtable like this. And the easy one, and this was always easy, you'd say, sister, I feed the hungry, right? And give drink to the thirsty. In other words, we donate. But I always thought that there was more to that. And in thinking that there's more to that, and I'll show you in a little bit later, that I ended up building a company. And the objectives in building this company wasn't to get wealthy, but one of the objectives was to honor my father, who was also loved entrepreneurship, but to be able to practice the spiritual and corporal mercies in the company, because I felt that if I did practice those, that the company would be successful. And so, again, for the food bank, I was on the food bank for 12 years. I'll talk about the company in a moment, because I did a lot of this through the company. We found a new corporate headquarters. I built new refrigerated spaces that you can drive vehicles into. We have a Saturday student-run food pantry. Oops, I'm sorry. Now, bearing wrongs patiently. So in 1999, based on the mercies, spiritual and corporal mercies, I opened a company. We have actually 3 divisions. And before I took this or worked with Maria, I followed the advice of my dad in hiring people that to many people are unemployable. I'm not saying that folks that were incarcerated are unemployable, but that's what I felt, and many people feel that way. And so over those 25 years, I've now hired 7 individuals that really didn't have much of a chance. You see, they were incarcerated and then paroled and released. But with those 7 individuals, I had many successes, or some successes, and some challenges. And I'll move on. I did not know until I took this class over the last 5 months about the barriers to reentry. All I knew was that I was trying to employ people that were not, well, in most people's cases, I know now they're employable, but were unemployable. And so I tried to eliminate as many barriers, but I did not know those barriers. But I paid them over 3 times the minimum wage. I provided on-the-job technical training in refrigeration repair, etc. I provided a company vehicle, okay, which was, well, buying vans are expensive, especially new ones. On occasion, I provided housing. I had a rental home that was nearby. The fella had children. The high school was a good high school in the district, so I provided the housing for him. And I even provided pay time for legal requirements. But with those successes, with those items, came a lot of challenges. And the challenges, I tried to do the best I could for the amount of knowledge I had in practicing this mercy. But again, I didn't have the knowledge. So with successes came some challenges. And most of the challenges came from the barriers of entry, in which I wish I had known over the past 25 years. that I just really learned about in the last 5 months. And so what I've done in the last 5 months with Maria is I've attended the prison presentation. I toured the prison education facility, including the HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. I began working with the Department of Corrections and their counselors to build possible certificates or credentials or degrees while folks are still inside students. And what I wanted to go is, after attending the IO presentations to learn more, again, I looked for answers of why were the last 7 folks that I hired, some of them, why were they not successful? And here's where I learned the barriers of re-entry, for the incarcerated. And we have to finish. The barriers to re-entry are identification, making sure that they have proper ID, proper benefits, transportation, housing, health care, sobriety, family, education, employment, and finances. Now, what I had successes in, I was able to work with them on identification and securing driver's licenses for the vehicles. I offered health, dental, uniforms, vehicle, and vision benefits. I provided company service trucks, provided a home, I provided health care. But there's where I ran into problems because I didn't know enough to talk about their parole directors, et cetera. And what I've noticed, there were problems with sobriety, problems with family, as far as children in high school, et cetera. Problems with some technical training, as far as in finances. A lot of folks all of a sudden made a significant amount of money, and they could not control their finances. We see that actually in the NFL a lot. And so, ladies and gentlemen, and I think that I don't want to go back to the overall summary yet, but again, we talked about the challenges. We talked about, I'm just having a little trouble here with okay. And so, again, to answer that colleague's question of why I started to focus on the IO program or coursework, as an employer and also as a faculty member, also someone who has 300 internship placement locations for hospitality people, which I know are in great need, that I would understand the reasons behind reentry failures. I attended because it was evident that those barriers of reentry should be and will be discussed if I happen to teach, which we're in discussions with, courses within the prison. And I'm going to discuss those, again, reentry barriers with folks before they reenter. And it was evident that many inside students often came to me and were asking, how did you start a company? I'm not saying it's a large company, but we're between 30 and 50% the size of Mercyhurst now in terms of revenue. You see? And so this is Mercy in action a little bit. Again, I'm looking at teaching a business course. I've asked my internship folks or future employers, I've invited them to presentations, to talk with these folks, to see how well they write. As far as I have those employers and myself looking at those barriers so that we thoroughly understand them. And then again, we're in discussions for not only additional one course, but additional programs. And so, truly, Mercy is in action with the IO course. It brought me to the IO course, which I would have never envisioned to do that until we spoke. Students are learning, both inside and outside students, the spiritual and corporal mercies. There are successes and challenges, but we are hoping, at least I hope we are, to extend the programming. These are resources, ladies and gentlemen, and we'd like to open the floor for any kind of question.
First, thank you for yesterday when we had our discussion. It was something I wanted to point out, but I'm going to get to the question because I was curious. I was talking about what got me into teaching at Trocare is I was teaching the prisoners that were about to re-enter as parents and about parenting education. It was a psychoeducational course. It was 12 weeks and how much not pushback, but there was a lot of emotions from staff members of the prison on me coming in to their world. And I found that being the only one who did that at the time, it was really hard to get. Now, as a counselor and as a therapist, in my role there, I was a psychoeducational, instructor. So I found myself, going to my supervisor, and I didn't get proper debriefing, and you noticed that right away. And so, do you have a debriefing for students that might almost have like a culture shock, or if those stories were told? Because sometimes I would talk about, the children, certain developmental milestones, and all of a sudden, organically, a conversation and sometimes a confession would come about to me, and and you have the COs in the room, and and it was challenging by myself. First, did you have a partner? And secondly, did you have a debriefing process?
Yes. So I have no correctional officers in the class with me. I have one social worker in the class with me who's extremely supportive of my work and moving these kind of programs forward. So I had a different kind of welcome, if you will, by the correctional officer staff. Some of them let me know in uncertain terms that they did not want me to be there. Why am I providing free college education credits to incarcerated individuals, but not to staff? I invited them to a class to say, like, this is what this is all about. So I want to dispel any myth that's out there. So I don't have a CO in the classroom. So that one has a different dynamic with the social worker there. Two, I do a lot of debriefing before the class even starts when I interview the students and let the outside students to let them know that we may hear certain things in class and not to react like, whoa. And I have the 45 minutes on the van ride home. So it's pretty immediate that if there's anything like that defining moment in class, we talk the entire 45 minutes coming home. If there's anything that was kind of shocking, again, we've had that debriefing time, and sometimes we actually kind of processed it out in that class. Because what's interesting is the first time I did the class, I just assumed, bad assumption, that all of the incarcerated students knew each other in class. There's 2,200 people in the class, and I'm 10. What's the odds? And they didn't know each other. And even if they knew each other, the space that we created was such that they felt comfortable disclosing certain things that some of those men may not have known about the others. So I do have that open line of communication with my Department of Corrections partner. And I have had one of the individuals through the inmate mail system ask if they could speak with me. And I've been able to have a conference call with that person about a concern. not a bad concern, just like something that they wanted to let me know in a more private space.
And there was a third question,
Oh,
but I
I'm
didn't
sorry.
I didn't want to forget it.
Oh, okay.
So, do you have a degree that they can go towards?
Right now, I do not. Right now, I do not. So right now, it's a single course offered by me through the Criminal Justice Department in Issues in Criminal Justice. So the goal is to expand to an
Yes.
entrepreneurship class in business. And in those conversations, and they're really preliminary right now, is that we would like to have like a micro credential.
Right,
And therefore, if that's possible, there's it's longer than what this conversation could be, but I'd be happy to speak with you separately, is that Pell Grants are available to students if it's going to if they're going to be a matriculated student in a degree or certificate type program that leads to a job where there's employment available. So there's a lot of different pieces that go along with that, but we're like at the very beginning of conversations, and it seems for this particular facility that the entrepreneurship and business is something that they're really interested
It's
in.
exciting.
So to follow, I have a comment and a question. This is amazing work. Thank you for doing it. So I had the privilege of working with adults with barriers to employment through my husband's job. And there's a national model that works with former incarcerates, especially with felons or with convicted felons who have not yet expunged their records. And the one big industry that accepts people is the food industry.
right, right.
Because they can't fill the jobs. So one micro-credential that's brilliant for this group is Serve-Safe certification.
And our,
Right.
Yeah.
it's not, the SCI Albion and SCI Cambridge Springs, which is a women's prison, that I'm in talks to do my next class in a women's prison, they have both of those certificates.
Right.
And that can be a great bridge to a more permanent, more fulfilling,
Absolutely.
until they get records expunged, which can take a very long time.
True.
They can work in the food industry.
And that's actually my area, hospitality.
Exactly, I
and
was
so
surprised
that's-
I didn't hear about this.
That's
until-
a reason with the internships and folks asking me. Go ahead.
So my question is, what differences do you notice with the people who complete your course, both inside and out, in their pathways or in their careers or whatever?
For the outside students, a few of them have changed their focus in criminal justice.
Mhm.
I've had two specifically who thought they were going into law enforcement and decided to go into corrections and reentry services. They were so impacted by what they were saying and some of the barriers, and realizing like they're just people too.
Yeah.
Why is there barriers and how can I help with that? And didn't really understand the complexity of all the different pieces that go along with that. So I have seen that. From some of the inside students, the personal growth from their reflections and from what they tell me is off the charts. Like, I would have never thought coming into this that it would have been such an impactful experience. And some of them, like James talked about, like even opening conversations with his son about what they were doing. Donnie was another person, and he has grandchildren, and he was telling them about the importance of value of education, that he came back after 27 years of being out of any kind of schooling, and he went back and just found it so fulfilling. And for him, he's also mentioned that he's made $300,000 a month and didn't need education given his entrepreneurial spirit. But telling, his grandchildren that the importance and value of education, even coming back this late in the game. Those are just anecdotal information.
So my question was initially going to be about, the women and having them in the classroom, but I wonder if, can you talk a little bit about any research you may have done to learn what their perspectives are? I guess I would assume that the women are going to have different issues in terms of, dealing with the family or whatever it might be, I guess. And I wonder how you get to that understanding with that, with just the 10 people, or is it something that you would look at?
I'm not sure I understand. Do you mean
Well,
did you see so most of the Mercyhurst students are women that I'm bringing into a male prison.
Right.
Do you mean those women, or do you
so I'm
mean when I
talking
go
about
to the new
if
facility?
you go to the new facility,
It will be different.
it'll be different.
It will be
So-
different. So I also teach a women in crime class, so there are different pathways to delinquency and criminality. Many of them are more centered on mental health issues, the family unit, and for looking at women who are in for drug kinds of offenses, typically they are also connected with a boyfriend or a husband that they're either doing something with them, or the house is in their name, or there's other things that go along with that. I still plan to do an issues in criminal justice course, but I think we would be spending more time on issues surrounding parenting, drug and alcohol, mental health, those types of things. So I also used to work with a sister of St. Joseph, actually, with the House of Healing, and that was a unique program in Erie, Pennsylvania, where women who were completing their sentences went to the House of Healing house, and they were allowed to have their children live with them up to the age of 12. And because that program was very unique, there was also different curriculum that they went through about parenting programming and things that were age appropriate as well. So I also used to be a counselor for delinquent and dependent girls in Pittsburgh. So that's more of my background. So me initially getting into the men's prison was a little more different than me, I think, would understand. And then you would be having the class there.
So when I was a grad student, I remember taking a multicultural education class and reading Pedagogy for the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. And as I was reading it, I thought of my privilege as a middle class person from Mexico and how difficult things were for many other populations in Mexico. And when I came to class for the discussion, and the professor asked about different moments of oppressions that they had witnessed, one classmate said that when they went to Starbucks, they didn't have the flavor that they wanted, and they would complain about it, and they felt oppressed. And to me, that was enraging. It was very, very difficult to hear something like that, minimizing all the other situations that I thought about and how privileged I felt. So my question in relation to this is, from what I see, I don't think you have had any issues of people making a faux pas like that in your classes, ignoring their privilege of having the freedom that they do. But do you prepare students so that they don't make a mistake like that, so that the people inside feel like, oh my God, these are so ignorant?
Yes. So we talk about power and privilege before we go into the class, one of those first days before. I meet with the men inside Albion separately the first class, and I meet with my students separately in the first class. We talk about power and privilege. We've gone through like Peggy McIntosh's like unpacking privilege and so forth. Although I also say that they're fearful that they're going to offend. And I say that we're creating a safe space for all of us while we're there. The first class, when we're all together, we do icebreakers to kind of bring the level of anxiety down. And that's typically when we get in trouble, when the correctional officers are like, it's too loud down here, because we're laughing. You don't hear a lot of laughing that's allowed in prison. But that first day, we also create our rules for dialogue and talk about what's acceptable and not acceptable in our circle. And somebody typically brings up, but what if I don't want to offend anybody? So, and they so far in each of the classes, they prefer that you get it out and we talk about it, and if it's not right, we'll process it right here. And the men are so open to that, because typically I think they feel very stifled and aren't very open in their normal everyday routine, how they communicate with people. and have really, I mean, in the reviews, they've all said that this is like the most safe and comfortable space that I've had in terms of my incarceration. So have we had a few things that have come through? Yes. One of those was in terms of most of my students are white that are coming through, but not all. One of them said something like, well, the African American people have I can't remember exactly what it was, but that they have been impacted more by mass incarceration. True statement. At the same time, one of the individuals said, one of the inside students said, I prefer to be called black. And he was like, and here's why. And we talked about that. That was like not prompted by me, that wasn't in the syllabus, that wasn't anywhere, but it was such that he felt compelled to let the rest of the class know that he preferred to be referred to as black. So we kind of processed through that, and we used the term black the rest of the semester because we agreed on it as well. That if that's what your level of comfort is and nobody had any objections, that we did that. So there were a few minor things like that, but yes, I do prepare them. I do have some readings for them. And I do say that there's likely, not everything's going to be perfect while we're here because I'm still learning too. And it kind of depends on some of the topics that we talk about where, like, I could not have imagined the capital punishment and restorative justice prompt coming forward either. And that was something I really felt that we had to process in the van on the way back. You know, like, do any of you feel afraid now that we're inside? Do you want to work with him on a group project? And they were like, no, I'm completely, I was kind of shocked, honestly. But they were completely fine with that. I had that happen in another class. It's similar to that. And there were tears that came down in that particular class for how moving his story really was. I also had, in doing another thing, a student talk about like abuse in the home as well. A Mercy Care student talk about that. So I don't want to say like I have the secret for like creating a safe space or anything, but I've been extremely impressed with how the individuals spoke to each other throughout the semester and seeing that growth from day one until the end. And I don't think that that's me. I think I am a facilitator in this. I am, sitting with the rest of us throughout the
Can I just ask
semester.
you a real quick, how do you assess this outside student?
Last question.
Oh,
Last question.
Sorry.
How do you assess them? I'm just.
So we have the idea. I mean, like, there's a classroom student evaluation of me. There's
No.
also
How
the
do
final
you assess your
reflection.
students?
Like, how do you grade them?
Yeah, how do you grade?
Oh, so they have discussion questions each week, so they get graded on that. They get graded on the reflection piece each week. They get graded on their group project, so that's a paper that they have to write together. They get graded on the group presentation, and then they get graded on the final reflection. And then I have rubrics for each one of them. Yeah, so some of it is much more qualitative, but I am looking for things that are much more insightful as opposed to, I've changed from day one to day. So yes, and how has that changed occurred?